Bart Loeser is the president, owner, and professional skills coach at JBL Events and Training. His talk today is entitled The ABCs of Effective Leadership, from Reactive to Resilient. He has been a corporate trainer, a speaker, and a coach for over 25 years. He currently runs the company teaching interpersonal skills such as leadership, communication, presentation skills, emotional intelligence, and productivity. A Texas native with a degree in psychology from UT, Bart is also an active community volunteer and leader, helping to create and organize projects, especially for personal and professional development organizations, including More to Life and Toastmasters. Bart has served Toastmasters District 55 in many capacities as a top leader and trainer for over 15 years, coaching and building many clubs and individuals. He served as an area director and as the assistant district director in the past year. This is a good time for me to also plug that we have a Launchpad Job Club, a Toastmasters group, and Launchpad subsidizes a little bit the money that you pay to join Toastmasters, but Toastmasters is such a wonderful way to improve your communication skills and your confidence when you're being interviewed, and your leadership skills in so many different ways. And I'm sure Bart might add some more to that. So without any more delay, let me introduce Bart Loeser.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that introduction. Very kind of you to read what I wrote. And you did it so marvelously. So thank you for that, and welcome everyone. It is quite an array of talent in this room, and I just want you to know that certainly one of the most important aspects about being successful in life is having the grit or resilience to come back from anything, get back up on the horse, and learn to ride again. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And just to share with you a little bit of my background, my fascination has always been understanding why people do what they do and how to get the best out of the facts. If you know why people do what they do, how can you best use this to work for you to be more effective in almost every situation? And that's what this seminar is about. This little webinar today is taking the best of what I've been teaching for 25 years. I get asked all the time, well, what do you recommend I do with this? Or what do you think I should do here? Or what's the most important thing I need to know about this? So I came up with a document, and I will put this in the chat room. Some of you may already have it, but if you want to print it up or have a look at this document, it's the ABCs of Effective Leadership. All of us are leaders, whether you're aware of it or not. We always have situations where we want people to follow us, where we want people to notice, pay attention, to respond in a specific way. That's what leading is all about. And yet many of us seem to be unaware of the challenges, like what gets in the way? Why aren't people listening? Why am I not getting the results I want? So I came up with this session to just give people the basics of things that you already know but probably aren't thinking about, and showing you ways in which you can apply this to work well in your life. So if you want to look at the handout, that's probably what I'm going to recommend, and I will be sharing our document. I've got a PowerPoint document that follows essentially the document that I've put into the chat room. I do want you guys to feel free and comfortable to ask questions at any point. So please do, and what we'll do is we'll just go through this, and if there's anything that you have questions with, if there's anything that you want to challenge me and say, hey, that's not how I see it, or that's not been my experience, I would love for you to share that, because certainly I'm here to be able to help you guys with whatever situations you may be dealing with, but if I don't know what those situations are, I can't help much. Now, what I love to do is to organize this, and I put it in this format of the ABCs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to follow, or that the flow of information flows exactly the same. But it's going to be in this particular method that we'll be using, and I'll be following this particular format. We'll be covering the A, always be mindful of the human condition. Understanding what human beings are about, why we do what we do, and what are some of the things that may get in our ways, including for us. Secondly, how to effectively build bridges for collaboration. This is the key in almost every aspect of interacting with other people. So I like to tell people that my specialty is in every skill that is interpersonal relations. But I also focus on things such as time management, how to be more effective with our own emotions, not just other people's emotions. But I'll be teaching you a little bit about how to build those bridges, because would you agree that you cannot even connect with someone if you haven't built some sort of a bridge? You can't truly communicate without having a bridge. So how do we build that? That's what we're going to focus on. The next is getting into the nitty-gritty, the actual communication tips that are the most important that I see that people aren't doing, that I would recommend highly. I will also talk about the biggest challenge that almost all human beings have, which is what's up here between our ears. We have this incredible brain, this biocomputer that can figure things out. But often the information that we take in based on the cues that we pick up on are just assumptions. They're not facts. But our minds often tell us things that are not true. And so we're going to talk about how do you deal with the challenge when your mind is sometimes telling you things that are not true. You don't want to act on those assumptions. We're also going to focus on the most important things you need to know about emotional intelligence. Some of you may have actually been to a class on emotional intelligence. I teach a class that's at least an hour to 3 to sometimes 6 hours on each of these topics. But we're going to focus on the best of the best in all of these. Perhaps the most important tool you'll use in interacting with other people is active listening. Because if you come across to someone else like you're not listening to them, it's essentially sending the message that I don't care. And the problem is, if we send that message to someone and we want them to care, people are not going to care back unless it comes across that you care first. One of our famous presidents, Teddy Roosevelt, once said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So showing people that you care by active listening is very important. Another powerful tool is accountability, both in ourselves as well as others. Because keeping your word to yourself as well as keeping your word to others cements our reputation. It builds our self-esteem. So we're going to talk about how to generate better accountability. And lastly, one of my favorite tools that I love to teach people is how to make people feel valued, which is the key to any workplace. If you're a manager and you want to get people to be willing to follow you, if they believe that you value what they bring to the table and you have a way to do it that's impactful, you will actually be able to influence almost anyone. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And I want to have a chance to ask any questions you might have, and make sure, if you would, to download that document. If someone would put that document in here for anyone who might have joined the meeting after I entered that, please do let them know. So where we'll go next then is just talk a little bit about the human condition. I like to talk about the box that we all find ourselves in. Most people, they like to label themselves, they like to label other people, that I am my box. This is just who I am. Sometimes you may be asked to do something, and in your mind you may be thinking, but that's not my job. What I'm willing to do is this. I'm not necessarily willing to do this. And yet our job in this world is to be willing to step out of our boxes. But we've got to think about what gets in the way. What is our brain telling us that gets in our way? Like, can anyone here tell me, why is it that as we get older, we like change less? Now, this isn't to everybody, but generally as we get older, we tend to resent the changes that life has brought about. Can anyone tell me why? You can just unmute if you have a sense of that. What do you think? Why do people get so upset about change?
People get stuck in their ways, but I think it's just normal human nature to be resistant to change. You tend to get used to routine and like that.
Exactly, Alex. And that's one of the problems we have, is that as we get older, we tend to be less flexible. Now, that's not necessarily true for everybody. I've got a friend of mine who I've been talking to for years, and now finally at age 77, she's decided to join Toastmasters to build up her confidence and to become a more effective leader and communicator, because she says those skills have held her back in her life. And I gave her a lot of kudos, saying, I am really thrilled that you are doing this, because I will tell you, it is rare that someone who is in their 70s will say, hey, I need to learn new skills. I want to build on where I'm at. I don't want to stay just where I'm at. I suggested AI to her, and she said, I'm not comfortable with AI. I said, well, you will get comfortable with AI after we're done, because that's what this is all about. It is the way of the world of the future, and it actually is a great cost-effective tool, time-effective as well as cost-effective. So we'll talk about some of these things, but embracing change is important. Somebody else had a question or comment. You can just unmute.
Isn't it some also that when you get older, you just have less energy? And
Oh,
so change takes energy.
well, that's a great point, Mary Jean, because it is so true. I'm just turning 66, and I will say my energy is not what it was when I was 60. It's not what it was when I was 50, and certainly not what it was when I was much younger. Of course, that was too much energy anyways at that time. But the whole point is that, yes, we have more limitations as we get older. But that's another part of change, is that learning how to take what life has handed us and learning to accept it as it is. Like I have not only had more problems with my sight, I now have to wear glasses, whereas for most of my life I never did. Although I did up until I was about my early 20s. Then I had an eye operation to have my eyes fixed. And so for almost 30 years, no problems. Now I'm not happy that I can't see without my glasses. But you can learn to accept that that's life as it is and not see it as a bad thing. And so I'm going to also say that I've also am losing my hearing. And I've been saying, I don't know how many more years I'm going to be able to speak up in front of people, because I can't hear them when they're across a room, even with hearing aids. And so that's a challenge that may affect my life, and I might have to find new ways of doing what I do. Now, of course, having a headset here, I can hear you guys just fine, so teaching online is not affected by that. Now, there's lots of other ways to get around this, but Mary Jean, adjustment in life is what we do all the time. You guys are adjusting perhaps to having had a job for many, many years, if not decades, and suddenly this stability you had in your life no longer is there. But actually, that's the norm in life. Life was never meant about being stable. We just as human beings have created a life that seemed like it was fairly stable, that you could just expect this money rolling in, that you could keep this level of this I guess, a status of life, this lifestyle going, when in fact, that's just an illusion. We never know what tomorrow may bring. But the better you are at learning to accept what is without fighting it and learning how to look at all your options. Kathy spent an hour talking about how many options are out there for us. I'm just blown away, as well as a little overwhelmed, Kathy. That's a lot of options. I don't know if I can remember all of those. But there's a lot of help out there, a lot of opportunities, but you have to be willing to see it, be willing to consider it, and be willing to risk doing something new. And most people don't like doing this after life is comfortable. We just want to keep doing what we know. But how many of you would agree what you know is always changing? And we must change with it. So that's an important piece. Did you have a comment, Kathy?
I do. I think one of the things that is always curious to me, I know that change, we resist it because of the fear of the unknown. But sometimes, even when the change is going to be good, we don't want it. Even when the change is going to be better, we don't want it, because we're more comfortable with the known misery than with the potential benefit.
That is so true. People will hold on to what they know, even if it's bad. How many of you have stayed in a job you didn't even like, but it was consistent? At least it was an income coming in, and I don't know what's out there. I don't know if I can find something better, so I'll just stay here. Well, sometimes life does you the job of not giving you that choice, and you have to explore it, which is not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. And Kathy brought up a great point about this idea of good versus bad. Actually, good just means we like it. Bad means we don't like it. That's all it means. There is no such thing as good or bad. It's just a judgment. And you can change that judgment. As a matter of fact, you can change it by changing your attitude. But we had a question from Tina, and then we will move on and take other questions in just a bit. Tina.
Yes, thank you for this presentation, Bart. So one other thing I'll have to comment. One other things that why people don't like change as they get older is the fact that at that age the brain prefers efficiency, right? We
Mm-hmm.
want to stay with tested systems that we know for sure it's true, right? So the brain doesn't want to take any additional risk. And this kind of explains why learning new systems or new technology feels overwhelming. It's
Yeah.
not that it's not possible, but it's just that it's kind of more demanding. Yeah, so the brain prefers its efficiency, wants to stay in that comfort zone, don't want to take a risk of coming out or throwing your heart in the ring.
And
So that
Tina,
being said, thank you. Go ahead.
yeah. Oh, I was going to just see if I could summarize that. What I think you're also saying then is it's all in our head. It's all about what we're telling ourselves, and you can change that message. But if your mind is telling you, I don't want to change, or I'm not comfortable changing, or I'm not sure if this is a good thing, and I don't want to do anything until I'm sure that it's the best move. It's like sometimes you just have to make a decision, even if you don't know it's the best. Would you agree?
Yes, I do. And one final thing, there's this book that was handed to me very earlier in my career,
Mm-hmm.
Who Moved My Cheese? That
Yes.
is a great read to handle change, whether personal, health, professional, whatever type of change. It is a great read. So I recommend you get the Audible, get the hard copy. You will appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, there are lots of different books out there that have a similar philosophy, which is, I don't like it when my cheese gets moved, but life is about one thing and one thing only. What do you think it is? What's the one thing that's going to happen whether you like it or not?
Change.
Change happens all the time, Alex. Yeah. And the problem is, what's the one thing most people tend to hate the most?
Change.
Change. So the one thing that life is all about is the one thing people are unwilling to embrace. And that's going to get in the way of your success in your life. And what gets in your way most is what you're telling yourself about the change. That's really the challenge. So if you want to turn any change or any mistake, which our biggest fear is that we might fail. That's the biggest human fear that we've got. And fear is the most powerful motivator that human beings have. And unfortunately, almost everything that's behind fear is false. But if you want to be able to learn to be successful in life, you've got to be willing to take a risk and fail. But failure is not a bad thing. Failure is actually a good thing if you're willing to do what?
Change.
Yeah. Or even better, Alex, learn from it. So so embrace that change and learn from the failure. Notice what went wrong, because you can't be successful unless you're willing to look at failure as a good thing, not a bad thing. Babies don't worry when they're learning a new skill in life, and they're having to learn so many skills in the first couple years, and yet they don't get embarrassed by that. They don't have a problem with it. They just get back up and they keep trying until they get it done, until they learn to speak, until they learn to walk, until they whatever it is that they're trying to learn. We just keep at it, and they seem to have no fear. I will encourage you guys to learn how to get rid of your fear. Walk through that fear, move past it. But you can't do it unless you follow 3 steps. To be successful, you must notice the failure. Most of us don't even notice when we fail, or don't want to see it. We're not very good at looking at ourselves in the mirror, and sometimes what we see is not true, but we don't like it. We tell ourselves things, and so sometimes it's important to get feedback from other people, but you can't do the first step of turning failure into success unless you notice it. That's why we get feedback from other people. So you have to be open to the feedback. The second thing you must do if you're wanting to be successful is you've got to own the fact that you're the one making choices in your life. So if you're the one making choices, who is responsible for your outcomes? And I like to always teach people this concept of radical responsibility. And if you want to write that down, it's always good to have a little sheet of paper or something to write on. I live my life by radical responsibility. I actually take personal development courses every year, and sometimes several times a year, to challenge my mind and get myself to be always willing to take responsibility, even for the outcomes I didn't want to believe were my fault. But I'm responsible for every choice I make, so every outcome I get is mine. So you cannot truly ever blame someone else or have an excuse. And who here would agree that no one cares about your excuse for not keeping your word? No one cares who you're going to blame of why you weren't able to make that appointment that you said you were going to make. The fact is, it damages trust, and it's hard to build that back. So if you make a commitment to someone, including to yourself, always own that choice you made and do everything you can to hold yourself accountable. We'll get to that a little bit later. But there's no such thing as a good excuse or blaming someone more than once. If it happened one time, I'm going to ask you to notice, well, what got in the way of you not keeping your word? And if you've had a good excuse this time, what are you going to do to make sure that doesn't happen again? And I'm going to hold you accountable for owning that choice you're making. And lastly, I don't want to beat you up. All I want you to do is to learn from it. And the only way to learn from something is to notice it, to own the choices you make, and if something's not working, come up with a different choice. Come up with options that you can choose. So come up with a way to fix it. Own it, notice it, fix it. It's a simple 3-step process on how to turn any failure in your life into success. Including if you were in a bad relationship. You could say, oh, well, it wasn't my fault, it was their fault. Well, who chose to get into that relationship? Who chose not to hold that person accountable for what you needed in that relationship? So actually, you are completely responsible for the choices you made, but don't beat yourself up over it. That doesn't work. That's not helpful. Just notice it, own it, forgive yourself, and fix it. So that's what I will say is a simple method for turning any failure into success. Never be afraid to fail. Take those risks. Even if you're not sure it's going to be the right choice, you can always change and do something else if it turned out not to be the best choice. There's never a bad choice. It's just was it the best one to meet your needs? So learn from this, and all of you are probably familiar with, if you're going to create a plan, it should be a SMART plan. So I'm not going to get into what a SMART plan is, but that's how you determine whether or not you can truly be successful. It has to meet those guidelines, the SMART. You can always look that up online. It's very easy to find. But how many of you would agree there are some people who are not very good at noticing? Like this cat is probably looking at this bird and thinking, lunch. What do you think the bird is thinking? Lunch.
Lunch.
Yeah. How many of you know some people who don't seem to be able to look at themselves honestly? That's going to get you into trouble. So be honest about yourself. It's not a bad thing. If you need to build skills, there's lots of opportunities to build skills everywhere in your life, and there's never a time when it's not a good time to build skills. Right now, this is a good time to build skills because you don't have a lot of things getting in your way of not doing that, and yet there's a lot of benefit. Right now, when you're searching for a new career, it may require learning new skills, having new approaches, maybe even thinking of a whole new way of finding a job or the type of job you might find. You can now do that now that you don't have another job taking up most of your time. You could join Toastmasters and say, I want to learn how to sound more confident, look more confident. I want to become a better leader. I want to impress somebody by saying, I joined Toastmasters and I've been in that for a couple years, challenging myself to be a better person and more skilled. What employer would not be impressed with someone who takes time to do that on their own? So these are little things that can make a big difference, but don't let overconfidence get in your way. Now, of course, here, who's really responsible for what happened? How many of us want to blame other people so we don't get into trouble? We learn this at age 1 to have a good excuse for why we don't have to be accountable to what happened. But we're always accountable. But look for the lesson. Don't look to hide from what went wrong. Look for how it could be better, how you could improve. But one of the things that makes the biggest difference of all for human beings is attitude. I'm sure you've heard this comment before, attitude is everything, because actually it shapes everything. Attitude is merely about what you tell yourself up here. If you change the message up here, you change the outcome. Gandhi once said that your beliefs shape your thoughts. Your thoughts shape your words. Your words shape your actions, and your actions shape your destiny. So if you want to change your destiny, you might want to go all the way back. Start by changing the belief systems that you may have that don't work for you, including not believing in yourself. That's not an easy thing to do sometimes in these situations where you think, well, if you don't have a job, it's hard to believe in yourself. That's not true. Do that work. Change those attitudes, because that's what guides your actions, and that's what will guide your destiny. And yes, sometimes it means you have to take a clothespin and do something. I'm going to put a smile on my face, and I'm going to think positively, even though I'm not in a very positive situation right now, because that's going to move me forward. And when you look at people and you smile and you're optimistic, people want to hear more. When you complain and you frown, that people, they don't know what to do with that. It makes them uncomfortable. They want to avoid it. So draw positive energy into your life, but it starts with you and your attitude. Change is inevitable. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. You cannot stop this. I am looking at my life at 66, and yes, I may live to 80. Now, I don't know many, actually, I don't think there's any men in my family who've lived to 80. So it's possible, but I know I'm down to my last good 10, 15 years of my life, and that's if I'm lucky. So I'm not really worried about that. I'm worried about the quality of my life, and am I living every day in a way that it matters and that I'm grateful. That's all I care about. I don't care whether I die tomorrow. Of course, I do want to have a will for that and stuff, but I do want to be prepared. But I don't worry about the future. I worry about the day to day and having the best attitude I can, because that's going to shape my tomorrow. Any questions about that? I know there's a lot of self-explanatory stuff. You guys probably know all this, but I'm just providing some context. And lastly, I love the serenity approach to life, because how many of us get stressed? And the number one cause of stress in human beings is when we want to have control over something and we don't. Imagine, like when you were going to work, did anybody ever feel like when you were going to work you were just parachuting into a pool full of crocodiles or alligators just waiting to bite you on the butt? And 15 minutes after your day started, suddenly it's a bad day. The only thing that makes it a bad day is what you're choosing to look at. This is not your workplace, but if that's how you see your workplace, you're not going to want to come to work. If that's how you see life, it makes life look pretty down. So changing your attitude changes your environment. It changes your reality. So one of the things I want to look at, that if you truly want to find inner peace in the life, it begins, as they say, the moment you choose not to allow another person or an event control your emotions. Because your emotions are all about how you choose to be, how you choose to see things, what your attitude is. And you can be in control of that choice, which is why I love the serenity approach, which is, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. Because if you cannot change it, there's nothing you can do about it, except accept it. And the second thing you can do is have the courage to focus on the things that you can change. And the last piece is having the wisdom to see the difference between the two. So always focus on what is under my control and put your energies there, and let go of the things that are not under your control. The next thing I think is so important is talking about building bridges. When we're building bridges, it's important to build a great emotional bank account with other people. This comes from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I love this book. It's just a common sense book. There's nothing new or blindingly intellectual about it. It's just common sense. But it's the 7 things that most people don't practice in life. And so he says one of those things is you must build an emotional bank account with other people. Give them a reason why they should want to care, why they should want to reciprocate. For when you do something, when you do something for them, they should feel, hey, I should do something back for you. And so one of the things that's going to help you in building these bridges is to set positive intentions with everyone. Imagine for a moment, Alex, have you ever been in a situation and you were nervous about being in this situation because you didn't know how it was going to turn out and you didn't particularly like this person, or you weren't particularly drawn to this person? It was hard to think well of them. Perhaps you were in a conflict and you wanted to work through the conflict, but if you can't think well of someone, would it be difficult to work through conflict with them?
Possibly, like you say, you'd have to change your opinion on it.
Exactly. And if you can think well of that person, that generally the way they see it, there's a reason why they see things the way they see it, and they believe that the way they see it is right, can you be willing to at least meet them halfway? And I said, I can see how they might see it that way, even though that's not how I see it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's easier then to approach this situation in a way where you can get the best results. But you have to start with it going on with your own mind, thinking, what's the intention for this situation? And I'm going to look to the most positive outcome and move forward with that versus worrying about the what ifs. If you think it's going to be a positive outcome, you generally get a more positive approach. It's all about envisioning in others that solution that's going to be both a win-win solution for us. Something that they'd be willing to consider to work with, that also we're willing to work with, that can work well for us both, to build that connection. So if you're going to make any assumptions at all, always assume the best and envision others in the most positive way possible. One of the things I love to envision here is that how do you reframe that in your mind? Sometimes you have to sit and close your eyes and think of this person that you might be in conflict with, and remember that they think that they're right and they're not willing to back down unless you do the one thing they want more than anything else. Can anyone tell me, what do other people want if they think they're right and you're going to have an interaction with them? What's one of the first things they like to do if they think the way they see it is right or correct or the best way?
Basically, that you confirm that.
They'd love you to agree with them. Yes.
Yeah.
How many of us are thinking, I can't agree with that person. They're a different religion than I. They have different belief systems. They have different values than I do. But it is their values, and it's their religious beliefs, and it's their political beliefs. If you start by thinking you're wrong and I'm right, it will not go well. You've got to be willing to at least concede that they think that they're right, and can I begin to try to see it their way? If you start there and can envision that, it will almost always go better. Another thing that's always going to help when you interact with people that builds that bridge is greeting them warmly and enthusiastically. That means with eye contact, but you don't actually look people into the eye. That can be considered rude or aggressive in some cultures. It's better to look at people at the bridge of the nose, which, as far as they're concerned, you are looking at them in the eye, but it doesn't have that sense of intensity that it does when you look people directly into their eyeballs. So look at them at the bridge of the nose, but you're still sending the message, I'm giving you my full attention. Here online, you learn to look into the camera. You don't look at their pictures, because if I'm looking at your pictures, it's clearly that I'm not looking at you. I have to look into the camera. It's another thing you can learn in these online Toastmasters meetings. But when you greet people warmly, and it doesn't even have to be a real smile, it just has to show teeth. Can anyone tell me why you should smile and show teeth? Like, I look at Tina's picture here, which I can see, and she's just got her picture up there, and yet it's a picture of someone who's smiling, who looks engaging, who looks enthusiastic, who looks warm. It draws you in. It makes you think, this is going to be a good thing, this interaction. So build that bridge with the proper greeting that's a warm smile. As a matter of fact, I teach people the best way to turn a bad attitude around is to take a minute out of your time and go greet and meet probably, 3 people. The first person you greet could be a total stranger, but you greet them with a smile, you say something warm, and possibly say something positive, like a compliment about something they're wearing. Somebody said earlier about Kathy's hair and how beautiful it was. Say, oh yeah, I just had it cut. So now you're wanting to, Kathy's immediate response was, well, it was, and you wanted to play it down, but actually all you need to say is, well, thank you. That's very kind of you. And just take in that gift, because we notice, I notice the jewelry that you're wearing, and so you're wearing accessories for a reason. You want to make note of that, and it gives somebody a warm connection immediately with someone that they like. You're complimenting something that they've made a choice, and it instantly builds that bridge. How many of you have tried that when you meet a total stranger and you comment on something that's a positive about something that they've made an effort to do? So, hey, I just love your smile. It's so warm and inviting. I love your hair. I would love to do something more with mine and I just can't do that, but I love what you've done there. Or I love that piece of jewelry. Where did you get that? These things draw people in. That builds that bridge and instantly makes you more likable. All of these things are just skills that you have to think about. You have to be conscious of it, because how many of you, when you're uncomfortable, you're not thinking about anything except your discomfort, and you're realizing, I'm not smiling, I'm not giving eye contact, I'm not connecting. So it's so important to think about those things before you even start a conversation. And lastly, under building bridges, communicate a willingness to do favors, sacrifice where possible. One way that I encourage people to do that, because you've known some people who have bad attitudes, who when they come to work they make it really clear they're in a bad mood. It's like, well, what creates your bad mood? It's how you're choosing to look at things. You can actually turn your mood around with that meet and greet exercise. It's a great way any time of the day to start your day, or somewhere in the middle of the day, turn your attitude around, turn your mood around by connecting with people in a very warm way. So that's why I encourage you to do this meet and greet exercise. But the key here is that when you greet the people, each time you move to the second person and then the third person, take it up a notch. Be even warmer, more engaging, more friendly. And by the third time, yeah, you might be feeling like you're exaggerating. But how many of you know some people who need to exaggerate a little bit before you're effective enough at connecting with someone? You need to get that level of energy up high enough. It's always easier to bring it down a notch than it is to get it up high enough. So sometimes when you're in a bad mood, you've got to get that up, turn on that charm, pay a compliment, and then the next person, do even more. And as you do that, though, you'll notice that the more you put out there, what tends to happen? The more people you engage with and are warm with.
People reciprocate.
They reciprocate, and it turns your mood around. So you can use this to ricochet a bad mood turn it into a good mood and bring that good mood back to you. That's what I'm saying here. And about returning favors, this is something to think about. I always try to remember if somebody, like let's say for instance, if Kathy were to say to me, hey Bart, can you help me with something? Now I'm always going to be helpful and I'm always willing to drop what I'm doing, but if I just drop what I'm doing to help Kathy, she might not get that I did her a favor, because it may be that she did me a favor because I'm waiting for someone to call and ask me for something to do or how I can help someone. Instead, I might say to Kathy, sure, Kathy, I'd love to help you here. Could you give me just a moment and I'll be right back with you? Or could you let me get to a stopping point and I'll be right with you? When I do that, what I do is I communicate to her, I'm happy to help you. At the moment, I'm in the midst of something, but I will sacrifice if you can give me a good stopping point, and then I'll help you. What it sends that message to that person is that you went out of your way. And it builds that sense of, wow, that is so nice of you to take time to help me. Now, if I had just stopped what I was doing and just helped immediately, it could be taken for granted by the other person, that they might not have gotten that I did them any big favor. It's like I always suggest that if you've ever known a friend who was in the hospital, what's the first thing that we ask somebody if we call them and we say we're going to come visit? What's the one thing we always ask? What do you ask somebody if you're going to visit them in the hospital?
Do you need anything?
Exactly. And what do they always say, Mary Jean?
Well, they'll either tell you what they want or they'll say...
Actually, that's a rare thing. That's rare. It's like, I would encourage that, but actually, Mary Jean, most people say, oh, no, just your visit would be enough. You're going there because you want to do something to make a difference, and there's almost nothing you can do, but you're wanting to do something, so you've asked, and they usually turn you down. Instead, if you're that person in the hospital bed, give them the gift of something they can do that will give them a sense of control in your difficult situation where they feel like they're doing something. It builds that bridge. Give them something they can do, and then they've done you a favor. And it builds that relationship, and you're more likely to do them favors as well. But so come up with something that you need. Say, well, actually, I'd love some Ben & Jerry's such and such ice cream. If you'd bring me some of that, that would be so wonderful. And I could do that. So these are the little things that can build that sense of reciprocity that builds human relationships. So just like it will burn a relationship if you don't return favors. There are some people out there who don't get that lesson. So it's a very important human lesson. Another thing we'll get into is communication. A lot of people aren't aware in communication that there's some sticky methods about communication. It's not about what you say to people, it's about what they hear. So communication isn't about the words you say, although words are important. But actually it's how they take your words that makes a bigger difference. And there was a therapist called, he was actually a psychologist, Albert Morabian, who came up with this study. And even though it's been contested a little bit, they do say that, yes, it does make a difference. The words you say versus how you say those words versus how you look saying those words. It's the 7-38-55% rule. The words account for 7% of how people take your message. Choose them wisely. Don't choose words that are words they won't understand. Choose words that are clear. But it's how you say those words, your tone, that's even more important. But also what you look like. This is why when you're communicating with someone, even online, it's better to do it on Zoom than it is doing it just by phone. But if it's by phone, which of these three are missing? Yeah, body language, right, Mary Jean? So body language is missing. So on the phone, words become double, but still, that means almost everything is about your tone. So if your emotions are high, will that color how your words come out? Look, I'm trying to be patient here, okay? How many of you are thinking that doesn't sound very patient? When you're irritated or annoyed, people will hear that in your voice, so do not try to talk to someone over the phone if your emotions are high. I'll teach you how to deal with your emotions, but when your emotions are high, you cannot choose an effective tone. It will betray what you're trying to say or how you're trying to communicate. So if you're irritated or annoyed, you're going to try to sound like you're not, but the words, the tone will show that you are. Even in emoticons, when that's body language. You could see the face, and even without the words, you know how they're expressing themselves. If I were to say, oh, or oh, huh, oh, the way you say it makes a big difference, but the way it looks makes even a bigger difference. You almost don't even have to say it, and people can tell what you're communicating. So let's look at this for just a little bit then. So just like with chess is about strategy. Well, you can choose the right word, but you might also want to make your intention clear at the very beginning. You don't do that in chess. But if someone doesn't know, why are you telling me this? Why do I need to listen to you? And you don't provide that information up front, people are probably not going to understand your communication well. So when you're communicating with someone and you want to make sure they listen and get it, make sure they know at the very beginning why you're communicating to them. And I would say especially with email, because how many of you would agree people don't read more than the first line or two of your email? So if you don't put in that first line or two what you want them to do or why you're sending them this email, they're not probably going to read forward. Let's say, for instance, I was going to ask Alex to repeat back something because I wanted to make sure we were clear, and I know the only way that I know we were clear is that he would have to repeat back his understanding. It's the only way I know. But if I go through something, let's say I delegate something to Alex, and I ask Alex, so here's what I need, Alex, and I describe to him what I need. Now, to make sure I was clear, I might ask him to repeat back what I just told him. What might Alex be thinking at this moment? And keep it clean, Alex. What might he be thinking if I ask him to repeat back what I just told him?
I think what you're getting at is why is he asking why is he doing that? Doesn't he think I was paying attention, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we start to get defensive as if there was a nefarious reason why I'm doing this, like trying to set you up for failure or I'm thinking less of you. And in fact, it's the only way I can confirm communication. So when should I make it clear I'm going to ask you to repeat back your understanding of what we're going to go through?
Before you ask it.
At the very beginning, yes. Then if I say, hey, Alex, could you do me a favor before we get into this? Could you do at the end just repeat back your understanding so that I can know that we're both on the same page? He probably would say, yeah, I got no problem with that. And then at the end, he would have no problem doing the one thing you have to do to ensure the communication was effective. Another thing that's important is because communication is so ineffective, we make mistakes all the time, we miscommunicate a lot, especially in email and text, people take it the wrong way. But if you make them wrong, if you say, no, that's not what I meant, as if they took it the wrong way, they're going to get defensive and not work with you. So always be willing to apologize for any part of a miscommunication at the beginning. If you realize there was a miscommunication, and how do you know? Because you got a reaction that you did not expect. Now, in this particular case, that was my dog's drink. My drink was in the front, so he was okay with drinking that. But it kind of looked like he looked guilty, so I thought I'd put that in there. Always be willing to apologize for your part of a miscommunication. I see that there was a miscommunication here, and I really do apologize. I thought I was being clearer, and I had failed to do so. Because in the end, if you failed to communicate to a person effectively, who's responsible for your failure to communicate that to them? We all know that's you almost 100%.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, Alex, if someone is not willing to listen to you and you haven't given them a good reason to listen, then you are the one who failed if they didn't listen to what you were communicating. So there's better ways to do this, but always apologize before you try to fix a miscommunication. Own that, because they don't like it when you make them wrong, but they're okay if you were the one who was wrong.
Yeah.
They're willing to work with you there, but just don't make them the party who was the one who was wrong. There's a great technique that we're not going to have time to practice here, but I love teaching people here, is how to set clear boundaries with people. If you've got to say no to someone, or if this just isn't a good time and you need to negotiate a better time, always be willing to say no assertively. One way that I teach here when I'm in the U.S. is the USA way. Now, if I were to teach in Canada, I don't use this formula. But I would say it's an easy one to remember. That if you're going to tell someone no, respectfully, the first thing you have to do is consider the fact that they've asked for something and they want you to respect that. So the best way to respect how they see it is say an understanding statement. Hey, I can see this must be very important to you. I see how important this must be to you. I can see how you could see it that way. So the understanding statement. The second thing is tell them what your situation statement is. Here's my situation. And I always like to start it like that. You give an understanding statement that says, I do care how you see it. Here's my situation. Now, the one thing I don't want to put between those two is what? What's the one thing that we want to say if we're going to tell someone no, but we do want to let them know we do care. I do care how you see it, but, however, how many of you would agree never say that after an understanding statement? Because what you've just done is negated what you just said, right?
Yeah.
Instead, just pause, say nothing, put a period at the end of your understanding statement, and then tell people what your situation is. Because if you want them to be reasonable, they're going to have to know, is there a good reason why I'm going to get a no, or why we need to negotiate something else than what I'm asking for? You want them to listen to that situation statement. Because if I just start with the situation statement and don't say the understanding statement, it just sounds like I'm whining. So they say, hey, Bart, can I talk to you about something? Well, I'm really busy right now. I've got this and this and this. Okay, that's not going to go well. So you say the understanding statement. I see that you've got something important that you need my help with, and I respect that, and I'm honored that you came to me. Here's my situation. Then I'm going to tell them why I'm busy. And then the third piece is going to be the action statement. So that's why I'm not going to be able to help you right now. I'd say practice this every day of your life, because there are always times when we need to set boundaries with other people, when it's just not a good time for us right now. So keep in mind, just like with no smoking, don't say but, just pause. Don't say however, just pause. Then tell people your situation and then your action statement. So it's either going to be a no, or you negotiate something that could work better for you. Any questions about that? So that's one of my favorite ways to teach people how to be assertive without being rude. You definitely want to set your boundaries, and some of you may be out there as may be difficult for you to say no, but that's one of the most powerful assertive tools to use in communication, is when and how to say no. Another thing that's important is keep in mind that when you have an agreement with someone, Verbal agreement's important because how do you know they've agreed exactly in the way you thought unless they repeat it back? So you need to have almost everything as a verbal, or a real-time conversation, but then to close the deal, that's when an email can be good, where you reiterate what we agreed to in an email. Because if you ever had someone come back to you and say, I don't remember agreeing to that, and then you can say, well, I've got this email here. Is this not what we sent to each other and agreed to? And then they can look at it and go, oh, well, I guess I did agree to that. So you can hold someone accountable, but you want to make sure not to make the written agreement the only agreement. It needs to be a two-way discussion first to make sure that what I think we agreed to is what you think you agreed to, then have a contract. It's extra work, but how many of you guys have ever fought with people who didn't agree to something that we were clear about? So that's an important piece to communication. Don't make email your sole communication. It's a terrible way to communicate anything other than if you need to get a one-way communication across to someone, like, I'll see you there in 10 minutes. But if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to send you a text wondering, hey, where would you like to go for lunch? That's a conversation. That's not a text message back and forth. Unless the person can say, oh, I only want to go to Chewy's. That's the only place I'll consider. Okay, that could be a good text message, but generally, no, it needs to be a discussion. So, and then you can finalize it with a text. Another important piece here, and I think this is one of the most important, is don't act on assumptions, and everything is assumptions. Everything you think about in your mind is an assumption. Every communication you have is an assumption. You don't know for sure if that's what they understood. You just assume that. That's why men have a big problem when they're listening, is that men tend to, more than women in general, assume that I understand where you're going with this, and once I've understood it, I don't need to listen anymore. So what do women mostly complain about men, if that's the way they tend to listen, is if I think I know what you're talking about, I can stop listening now. Is that true, or is that an assumption? You always want to verify to clarify, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But where do these assumptions come from? They come from our beliefs, which is how we were raised. They come from our perceptions, which is how we see, how we hear. Well, my hearing perceptions are very different than other people's. They're distorted now because of my hearing. So sometimes what I'm hearing may not be what they said. Sometimes what I saw was not actually what happened. How many of you had that happen in your life before? So the only way you know what's true is you can't base it on your experiences in the past, because your experiences in the past does not mean that that's what the situation is today. How many of you have ever heard someone say this? Oh, that's not going to work. We've tried that before. Are you saying that experience in your past can predict your future? Is that true, or is that an assumption? You never want to just act on those assumptions. You always want to do what? You want to ask questions. Like, I'll do a very quick exercise here. I'm not going to have a lot of time here with this, but of these 4 different shapes, they're all very different. And I love to ask people in my classes, but which one is the most different? And almost everybody looks at this and says, I think it's a square. Yeah, but why is it the square? Well, because it's got 4 straight lines. The others don't have, one of them has a straight line, but none of the others even have straight lines. So that's the most different. And I said, yeah, that's the way it is, but actually, it's a trick. Because it's not the square, it's actually the circle. Why do you think it's the circle? Well, it's the only one with 1 straight line, and all the other ones, even though even the square, they all have 90-degree angles, this is the only one that doesn't have any angles, or maybe just one angle, a 360-degree angle, and it's like a perfect shape. All the others have lines that go in different directions, but this is one line that only goes in one direction. Can y'all all see that? So that's why it's the circle. And then I tell people, actually, it's not the circle, it's the half circle. Why is it the half circle? Well, it's the only thing that's half of something, and it's the only one with a straight line and a curved line together. And if you look at the 4, it's the smallest of all the figures. So how many of you can see how it can be the half circle? And then I ask, who thinks I'm playing a game? Like, Mary Jean, do you think I'm going to go to the crescent next? Nope, it's the half circle. But, well, actually, when you look at the crescent, you say, well, the crescent is the tallest of all of them, and it is the only one made of 2 different curved lines. And it's the only one kind of, well, you can look at it this way. You might say that the square, the circle, and the half circle are standard geometric shapes. The crescent is not a standard, right? And which one has the sharpest points of all of 4? That's 5 differences, right? You could cut yourself on that crescent, but the others don't have very sharp points. So the crescent has 5 differences, so it's the crescent overall, right? And then people get mad, and usually the people who get the most mad are the ones who chose the square, because, people who chose the square, and they're always the first ones to say, hey, look, if you look at it this way, the circle, the crescent, and the half circle are all phases of the moon. The square is not even related to the moon. That makes it even more different, so it's the square after all. So I have to agree. You're right, it was the square. So what's the point that I'm making here? Well, the biggest point is, as human beings, we all love to be right and we hate to be wrong. But we don't mind making other people wrong. How often do we make other people wrong before we even consider that they could be right as well? Instead, get into the habit of always asking questions. Always be curious. Always be willing to be the first person to seek to understand, then seek to be understood. That's Stephen Covey's habit number 5 in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Always seek first to understand, then to be understood. It's amazing how different it can change your perspective when you see how they see it first. And they're more willing to listen to how you see it if you listen to them first. Would y'all agree? These are great habits to get into that are going to help you almost anywhere in life. Another great one to get into is to keep in mind the value of the WIIFM. And that stands for what's in it for me. People are not willing to follow where you're going if they don't see what's in it for me. So your question or your challenge, if you want people to follow you, if you want people to agree with you, is you got to give them a what's in it for them to want to agree with me. What are the benefits to them of this? All salespeople know you never sell people on the features, you sell people on the benefits of what benefits these features have to them. That's what sells it. So always be thinking in terms of the WIIFM when you're talking to someone else. What's in it for them to want to listen to me? Did I make that clear at the very beginning? Always do that at the very beginning, early on, as Alex had said a little bit earlier as well. So thank you. The next section is one of my favorites, emotional intelligence. I love this because how many of you would agree people can make you mad? People can hurt your feelings. Everyone look to your left. Now look to your right, then your left, your right, your left, right, left, right, left, right. Actually, people cannot make you mad. People cannot hurt your feelings. People cannot stress you out. You choose to get angry. You choose to feel stressed. You choose to feel hurt. That's your mind creating the situation. Who's responsible for what you created? You can't blame other people for being stressed out, for having a bad day. That's how you're choosing to look at a situation. You're 100% responsible for that. So you can control it, and that's what emotional intelligence is all about. As it says in the handout, people can push your buttons, especially your emotional buttons, especially your family, but you choose how you respond. So people can't make you mad. They cannot hurt your feelings. They cannot make you feel guilty, not even your mother. And I'm sure, Mary Jean, you're probably thinking, well, you just don't know her. But actually, no, they can't make you feel guilty. That's you. And you can change that. So take control of your emotions. But you got to be able to notice when they're getting high, because when your emotions are surging, you cannot think clearly. You cannot make good decisions. You've got to bring your emotions down. So you've got to own the fact that if you've got to notice it, you've got to own the fact that you're making this choice to get angry, feel irritated, and you must make a choice to fix it. And here's what I'm going to recommend you should do. If you ever find yourself emotionally on fire, you use the same rules that you learned in grade school when you find yourself on fire. If your clothes are on fire, don't run. What did they tell you to do? 3 steps. Stop, drop, and roll. So the first thing you have to do is you've got to stop and get yourself out of a situation if you notice you're about to go off on someone. Stop. Do not do anything. Get out of that situation. Walk away. Then do something to drop your emotions down. I teach a whole workshop on what you can do to lower your stress, to calm yourself. Deep breathing, taking in a full deep breath is a very important part, but most people don't know how to do that well. So that's an important piece. Deep breathing. Go take a walk. Go exercise. Go talk to someone. Vent these emotions. They are impressed into your body and you must express them to get them out. And then at that point, once your emotions are down, you can then decide how you're going to roll. Is that helpful for you guys? So stop, drop, and roll when you get emotionally triggered, which can happen a lot. It's easy to get triggered because your mind tells you a lot of things that are not true. But it's all about what your mind is telling you. Now, when other people get triggered, you can't be effective with them. So if you want to learn how to get other people to listen to you and their emotions are high, you cannot do it. You must first calm them, and you can't make them calm down. The only way to get people to calm is you've got to demonstrate empathy. And the 3 methods I teach people is a simple but difficult method. So I'd say it's simple but not easy, because you have to listen actively. And who gets to decide if you're listening to them? They do. You've got to acknowledge your understanding, because people like to be understood. They want to be heard, they want to be understood, and the last thing they want is they want to be right. They want you to tell them they were right. You have to validate them. That's not an easy thing to do, but you have to seek, how could they see that they're right when I don't think they're right? If you want them to listen to you, you must first listen to them. Acknowledge your understanding, and then be willing to validate how they see it before you ask them to listen to how you see it. To me, that's the most important thing I've ever taught about how to negotiate or deal with conflict in life. It's these 3 things. That's what people want from you more than anything else before you do anything. I'm going to say this very quickly, that listening is a very important skill. I love teaching a whole workshop on that. Keep in mind, who gets to decide if you're listening? They do. So you always have to be attentive to, are they listening? And what demonstrates active listening, if you're going to demonstrate that you are actively listening to you? And why should you verify to clarify? Because it's the only way that you know that they understood you. And the only way you can let them know that you understood is not, I understood, or it was clear. That's an assumption. Instead, you must verify by repeating back or paraphrasing back your understanding. So here's how we're going to do that. One thing I love to teach people is the ancient Chinese symbol for listening. How many of you are familiar with this? None. Okay, so if you go to the ancient Chinese symbol for listening, it actually stands for 5 things, and they're all represented in this symbol. The first thing is the ears. As you can kind of see on the upper left, kind of looks like an ear. You listen with your ears. You also listen with your mind to figure out what people are saying. You also listen with your eyes. So as a matter of fact, visuals are so important for human beings. So we use that a lot for communication. We also listen with our focus. So that's part of this symbol is focus. Stay focused. And lastly, we listen with our heart, with our feelings. And so actually listening is these 5 things. It's not just getting the sounds into your ears and transforming them into an idea. It's actually seeing it, hearing it, feeling it, understanding it, as well as keeping your focus so that people think you are paying attention. So pay attention. This is the key to active listening. One of the best ways to prove you're actively listening is to reflect back, verify to clarify, paraphrase back your understanding. And some of the elements of attentive listening are those things of looking at the eye contact, look at the bridge of the nose. But also, if you find yourself not listening to someone, there's a technique I've got in here that you could practice that can help you to control a situation. Have you ever talked with someone and they're just going on and on like I am right now, and you're just not paying much attention anymore? One thing you could do is re-engage them by interrupting. It's not rude if you can re-engage. So how do you do that politely? And it's also on the ABCs here on this handout. Number one, get their attention because they're talking. There's a polite way to do it. Excuse me, pardon me. Then apologize for interrupting because your intent is not to be rude. Let them know that up front. And then clarify why you're interrupting. I may clarify by paraphrasing back my understanding. Let me see if I'm understanding you clearly. Or I think I know where you're going here. Is this where you're going? And give them a chance to verify. So it also could be that they're not making any sense. So I might say, excuse me, I'm sorry for interrupting, but you're not making any sense. Oh, nope, don't do that. Because did I just make them wrong? Instead, use I language, not you language. So instead of saying, you're not making any sense, I'm not understanding you. Or I'm not getting what you're saying or what you're wanting me to do with this. What exactly are you wanting? And you ask them to get to the point. But always be willing to interrupt to control a conversation, but you've got to do it tactfully. But you can do this with a boss even. If you have someone who just doesn't get to the point or they're talking over your head and you're not really listening, it's doing no one any favors, so you might as well interrupt. And lastly, accountability. This is also a very important skill, especially for those of you who are leaders or parents or anyone who leads in your life. It's always good to set standards and rules. And rules help us to get along. That's why we have rules. And even though, does there need to be a sign to warn you that you're following the rules or not following the rules? Yeah. If you agreed to the rules, you should follow them, but that's a good reason why they are written down. Because if you don't see that cop there, how many of you guys know that, or if you passed by this sign and the cop car was not there, how many of you would think, I don't have to pay attention to that sign? If you agreed to the rules, even if the cop car wasn't there, you should always follow the rules. Otherwise, it creates chaos. And believe it or not, of the 4 personality types, one of the 4 thinks rules are meant for other people, not them. Then there's the second type of person who will follow the rules if it's convenient. Well, how many of you think you should be able to speed if you're running late to work? I'm running late. I should be able to speed at that time. No, speed limit's the speed limit, no matter what. And there are other people who will follow the rules if it looks like everyone's following the rules. And the 4th type of person, they love structure, they love rules, they probably wrote the rules. It drives them crazy when people don't follow rules, and they follow rules to the measure. But that's 4 very different type of people, all following rules differently. So if people are not following the rules, always be willing to hold them accountable to what we agreed to. Deal with that elephant when it's the moment you see it. Like Mary Jean, I'll just ask you very quickly, it seems like you're in an office that would not fit an adult African elephant, would it? Can you get an elephant in there? Probably not, right? It would be dangerous. It'd probably knocking over desks. It could kill you. You got to get that elephant out of there. How do you do it? Could be in Alex's office. How do you get an elephant, a full-size elephant, out of your office?
Oh, I think you're getting at how do you eat an elephant, and that's a bite at a time.
Yeah, but that elephant's not going to like that. You better. So instead, the only way you can. What was that, Mary Jean?
How about some peanuts?
Yeah. Well, and is it going to go? Where's it going to? Will it get through your door? Will it go through that window? No, peanuts are not going to help either. Actually, sadly, yeah, there has to be an opening, but if there isn't, then there's nothing you can do but one thing, which is you're going to have to, shoot it and cut it up into smaller pieces. It's the only way you're going to get rid of that elephant. But then Mary Jean's wondering, well, if you can't get him out of my office, how did he get there in the first place? Someone had to walk him in here when he was small. And they walked it in there and then let it grow into something that got out of control. How many of you would agree that we don't like holding other people accountable? Until when? Till it gets to be a big problem. When should you deal with it? When it's small and easy to deal with.
Yeah, well, before.
Yeah, but how many of us are not proactive, Alex?
I guess a lot of people.
Yeah, how many people don't search for a new job even if they're at a job they hate? They wait until they get fired from the job or somehow eliminated from the job, and now they got to look for a new job. And it's like, well, shouldn't they have been looking long ago when they were unhappy? But human beings aren't very proactive, but that's a good habit to get into. Be proactive. And keep in mind, if you're going to come up with a solution, it's always the person who has the problem who should come up with the solution. Even if it's your kids, if you want people to buy into a solution, it needs to be theirs. Now, their solution also has to work for you if it impacts you. So it's got to have to be a win-win solution. So you might have to negotiate, but you always want people to come up with their best solution. And if they don't know what a good solution is, your job could be to provide them lots of options to choose from, but who has to choose if you want them to truly buy into a solution? If you want the best results.
Obviously, they do.
Yeah, it should be their plan. It's just that sometimes, Alex, their plan has to work for you as well. And then, of course, if you want that plan to go well, always come up with great incentives. And the last thing I teach is what's the best way to incentivize other people. The most powerful thing you can do is praise people at the right time. So when you praise people, there's a good practice to get into is always find something that you can praise someone for, but not when they're expecting it. Sure, you thank people if they've done you a favor, but then you come back an hour later or a day later, you call them up when they're least expecting it, pull them aside, and praise them specifically about something they did. And it's got to be something measurable and specific. You praise them on the benefits of doing that action, encourage them to do more of it, and then walk away. Because, Mary Jean, it has to be a one-way conversation. I might come up to Mary Jean and say, hey, Mary Jean, can I talk to you about something? And immediately she may be going, uh-oh, what is this? I must be in trouble. Well, I got her attention. So immediately I want to say, hey, I just want to say in the meeting this morning, you shared a great idea that got the conversation going. And I think we've had a better conversation about this topic today than we've had in weeks. And I just want to thank you for bringing that up and getting that going. I realize you don't speak up that much in meetings, and I would love to hear more of that from you. It made such a difference. So thank you. And then I walk away. How are you feeling at that point, Mary Jean?
Appreciated.
Exactly. Valued for the thing you did and more willing to do more of it. When you get good at these skills, they will take you far. So I know I've gone a few moments over, but I hope this was helpful in understanding the handout, the ABCs of effective leadership. This is normally a 3-hour seminar where we get to really get into these things in much more depth. But these are 25 areas that if you practice these, you will be so much more effective in every area of your life. I love teaching these tools and teaching people everything they need to be more effective, whether it's emotional intelligence, how do you keep calm when you're just trying to help someone but you're not being very patient? It's not helpful. So learning how to manage your emotional intelligence is important. Learning how to have better meetings. There's no sense in having meetings that are bad or ineffective. So at this point, I will leave this to any questions you guys may have, but I know you have busy days and you've got lots on your plate, but I want to thank you for the time you've given me. And my name is Bart Loeser. I love teaching these skills and promoting them and helping people in Toastmasters anywhere I can. So thank you.
You're getting lots of kudos and gratitude in the chat. Great presentation, great presentation. Have a good weekend. So
Thank you.
And a lot of it, I mean, being unemployed, losing a job, especially if it was a job that you absolutely loved. And a lot of our people currently are dealing with that very fraught situation. And so definitely the slowing down and trying to control your reactions and figuring out what is a useful reaction and what is something that's not going to help, and identifying positive actions that you can take as a result, instead of making yourself and everybody around you miserable because there's nothing you can do. So those kinds of options are good to be reminded of.
And I'm putting the handout back in the chat room for anyone who missed the overall the ABCs that follows the flow of the presentation.
Oh.
And we've recorded this presentation as well, which I believe y'all will make available.
Yes. Very helpful. Thank you, Bart.
Great job, Bart.
Thank you. Thanks for participation as well.
Now, if we look up on YouTube, can we find some of your Toastmaster presentations?
Oh yes, I'm all over there. Lots of presentations about that, and More to Life, which is more personal development, learning how to clear up the problems of telling ourselves things that are not true, and how do you figure out what is true and act from that instead of how we're reacting.
That's a good piece of advice. Well, thank you very, very, very much. We appreciate you so much.